If you think that the pressure is too much, then get rid of him. But this limbo is bad. This limbo is horrible for our markets. This limbo does not give anybody confidence about what is going to happen in the next few weeks. That's a sad story. And when I started, I asked myself, the Great Awakening. You know what? I don't think so. Those MPs are acting out of self-preservation. They know the situation is so bad. They know that if they don't seem to take action, there'll be a bloodbath for sitting MPs when we get back to an election. So all you're doing is being able to say that I stood against the minister. But it doesn't cut eyes with me. I don't think it's a great awakening in the public, in Parliament. I think what is happening is just self-preservation and a way to do a hop-step balancing act to keep the status quo, and yet to be able to say to the public that, oh, I was one of those who kicked against the Minister of Finance. Let everyone who is against it stand up to be counted. And those that are for him to stand up to be counted. But this limbo is definitely bad. Thank you very much.
Well, I told you before he came to the microphone, and I'm pretty certain that there has been no disappointment. The worry is about the limbo. You could stand behind him and you could push him off the cliff. If we have to push him off the cliff, let's do it now and let's do it fast. And if we have to stand behind him, let's stand behind him so that the market is not confused and so that we don't suffer the consequences of a confused market. We'll be interrogating what our brother and friend has said, Mr. Joe Jackson, when we come to make our comments and when we come to raise questions. He appeared to be a bit unsettled about the fact that he's speaking at a forum organized by a socialist forum or Socialist Movement of Ghana, when he describes himself as a full-blooded capitalist. I'd like to assure my brother, Mr. Jackson, and incidentally, I think we went to the same school, that socialists have no fear of debate because we are convinced of our facts and analysis, and we are ready to debate even Adam Smith himself. Because also we believe that every citizen, irrespective of the ideological persuasion, ought to have a right to speak out. Socialists have always defended the freedom of people to speak and to speak their mind. So we are in very good company, and you need not worry at all about your orientation. Your declared orientation does not worry us. What we are interested in is the correctness of the analysis and the correctness of the facts. And we can continue to talk. Now is the turn of a lawyer. It's the turn of a lawyer. A lawyer. And you know what lawyers do best. The language ought to be correct, and if the language is not correct, then it isn't correct. The logic ought to be correct. They look for logical consistency in their arguments and their submissions, and above all, they are supposed also to be looking for justice. Now, one of the issues that we have to address, and I've heard many people describe the parliamentary process as a process which must necessarily necessarily allow the finance minister to defend himself. And when I hear those arguments, I begin to wonder, has Parliament now been reduced or upgraded, I don't know, I'm not sure, to a judicial chamber? And if Parliament is not a judicial chamber, then perhaps the standards ought not to be the same. If Parliament is just a political platform, what would it mean for the rules which insist on the right to self-defense and so on? I'm sure that our very eminent lawyer Andrew Appiah-Danquah, will do justice to this topic. It is my pleasure to welcome to the microphone this very distinguished lawyer.
Thank you very much. Am I allowed to call you? Even though I'm not a socialist myself. Thank you very much, Comrade Kwesi, Pratt, Mr. Pratt, for this opportunity to air my views, be it legal, be it political. I'm not a finance man like Mr. Jackson. I attempt to speak some small finance also. So at the end of the day, I think I'm allowed to air my views, whatever form it will take. Let me also add that growing up, and I'm a baby compared to when Mr. Joe Jackson mentioned a year he was in school, when Ghana was having an economic problem like we are in. I think I was just born, or so I'm a baby compared to the two of you. And certainly growing up, one of the names, growing up in J.J. Wallace's Ghana, when democracy and freedom of speech and everything else was taken from us, and even into the 90s when people had to fight and demonstrations had to be had and lives had to be lost, for us to get the opportunity to speak our mind. I remember one of the strong men was Kwesi Pratt, and I consider it a huge privilege to sit on the same platform as he, to air my views on things that ultimately should help our country grow. Lastly, let me add that I'm also an avowed capitalist, like my senior brother, MC Joe Jackson, and I'm sure the organizers of this program ought to know, because I've been on Pan-African TV a number of times, and everywhere I go, I make sure I lay bare my capitalist credentials. So to have invited me, even though I'm sure they are so sure that I hold different views, is commendable, and I must say that. Like you already said, politics or political views or politics, democracy, what it does is that it gives us an opportunity to speak our mind, to say our views as to how we believe governance ought to be done. And you should be, and that right to speak your mind should be protected no matter what. We should never be afraid to share our views, and no matter what. I think what the problem we are going in right now is because over the last decade, within the ruling party, that right was in a way trampled upon a bit, as in, and without fear of being overcritical. But over there, between 2010 and 2016, you dare not criticize certain people within the MPP. And I believe the problem we are facing now is because people wouldn't listen, and people don't believe that people will listen. So people with different views, different minds, just won't speak, or even if they speak, then their views won't be heard. I'm saying this because after the 2021 election, when the parliament was split, it became 137, one would have thought that serious consensus building, steps at building serious consensus would have been taken. We all saw what happened last year around this time when the e-levy was being introduced. How, because of lack of consensus, we had to waste close to 7 months debating on the e-levy matter. So I'm very glad that at least this forum, a forum for freedom, would give anybody, all of us, an opportunity to speak, in spite of the fact that clearly Joe Jackson's view and my views will be different from the views of this forum. I'm really grateful. Now to the reason why we are here, and the issue of the censorship cannot be discussed without discussing what happened on the 25th of October. 25th October for me will go down as a watershed moment in the history of this country. And I'm saying that it will go down as a watershed moment in the history of this country because for the first time in the democratic history of this country, members of parliament of the ruling party dared to take a stand against their own party. And I'm saying dared to take a stand because on that day, they told the whole country that they are calling on the president to ask the Minister for Finance to step down. Just a few hours after, the minority then began their processes at taking censure against the minister. Now, the issue is, even before the majority took that stand, members of the NPP, as in communicators of the NPP, including myself, had gone on various platforms calling for the minister to either resign or to be sacked by the president. And so, like my big brother said, one would have thought that once the majority had taken that stand, and then the censorship motion by the minority would have gone smoothly. Sadly, we haven't seen that. We are entering into December, and Ken Ofori-Atta is still the finance minister of this country. Now, the question is, why, I've said that in my view, I felt that he had to be sacked. Why do I hold that view? Am I saying that he has acted incompetently like the minority are saying? Am I saying that the way the economy has been managed has been so that it can never be compared to how our economy has been managed in previous times? Not necessarily. My view is that as in the situation we are in, is a situation that the way our economy has been managed over the past few years certainly would have gotten to a stage where it would have come to this stage. Why am I saying that? Now, why are we having this economic crisis? And my brother here, I listened to him 2 weeks ago. He's been vindicated. He was arguing that there will be a haircut. Government said there will be no. I think today is so clear that the haircut is going to happen. Now, sometime around this time last year, there was a huge debate after the budget was read, whether we should, about the e-levy. And there was a huge debate because government was attempting to introduce a revenue mobilization a plan which has never been attempted in the history of this country. Now, a lot of communication was had by government on why it was necessary that they introduced this novel means of revenue generation. They said all manner of things. Without e-levy, we can't build roads. Without e-levy, then the fuel teachers will stop. Without e-levy, so without e-levy, practically nothing was going to happen. Now, that was November. At that time, the economic indicators, as in inflation, wasn't this bad. The rate, the dollar was depreciating, but it was not at this alarming rate. In fact, things at that point, you had to take those who understood finance to be able to tell that we will come to such a time when 1 liter of fuel will be hovering around 20 Ghana cedis. Because I remember not too long ago, a gallon was around 16 cedis. You had to take people with financial eye. For me, with the benefit of hindsight, I think that at that time, when the budget was being introduced, the finance minister at that time, because having all the financial information available to him, and I'm sure he knew that we were heading towards this stage, and that's why they painstakingly attempted at introducing the e-levy. Now it took us close to 7 months before this e-levy was passed. Now the point is, my view is, at that time, I think the decision should have been made, no matter how painful it was, no matter how it was going to bruise certain egos, to have gone to the IMF. Because clearly, at that time, we had serious balance of payment issues. And that's why they felt that they had to be creative in their revenue mobilization. Now, for me, leadership is all about being able to take decisions and being able to take that decision in the right time. And because just the 6 months delay or 7 months delay, 8 months delay in our decision to go to the IMF is one of the, in fact, is the main reason why we are in what we are now. Now, when in November, all these e-levy issues and all the debates and all the what's it called, commentary surrounding it, when it was being had, it's very bad signals, obviously, was being sent to the international credit environment, where we, as if you have followed how our economy has been run over the past 10 years or over 10 years, all we do is that we go to the International Credit Committee, we go and raise euro bonds, we shore the CD, we take care of things, and then it's just that cycle. There's nothing extraordinary we have done ourselves to enable us be able to take care of the things we need. And so for me, at that time, that decision should have been made. And because the minister failed to make that decision, and I'm sure that the only reason why the minister failed to make that decision was because of commentaries that has been made by the minister himself, just prior to the budget. While we be a proud nation, we will never go to IMF and blah 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 blah. And so he felt that his ego would be bruised, or it would be politically suicidal if we went to the IMF at that time. And for me, just that reason alone is enough a reason for the finance minister to step down, because at that moment he failed to show leadership. Because you see, when you are a leader, I think the most important consideration when you are taking decisions is what is in the best interest of the country. And I believe that when you interview a lot of people, even within the NPP, why they felt that the finance minister had to resign, it was because of the lack of leadership he showed at that very critical time, and that's why the finance minister had to leave. Now, if that's the case, if we believe that the finance minister had to leave, and for this reason, then why is it that the majority has an issue with the minority on the censorship? Now, to be able to understand that, I think we need to understand also the kind of political system we run. See, whether we like it or not, and see, that system can also be seen in the kind of legal system we run. Our system is very adversarial in nature. Our system, whether I like it or not, is very adversarial in nature. And because of that adversarial nature, parties on different divide, on different political divide, would close ranks when they think that the other side wants to make political capital out of a situation. And that's why, for me, I was a bit shocked when the minority decided to take the censorship at the time they did. It was a situation like two siblings fighting, and an outsider tries to come in, and then that outsider tries to take one person on. Then the natural inclination would be for the sibling to try to help his brother. I'm not saying it's right, but that's a reality. That's a reality. And so for me, I thought that at the time when the minority took the decision to file that motion, that politically or strategically it was a wrong move. I feel like what they should have done was to have sat back and allowed the majority themselves to get the finance minister out of office. Because the point is, in the short-term solution to the economic crisis we need requires that the finance minister leaves. He must leave, so at least we will have some confidence in the market. My senior brother kept on talking about the market, because what we are going through, how the market sees this and how the market responds, or the confidence the market has in who is leading, is very critical. Now, having said that, now let's go into the legality of what is being done. And Uncle Kwesi Pratt brought the issue up as to whether or not Parliament was wading into, or Parliament not being the judiciary, whether or not the same rules would apply or not. Now, when we go into our constitution, as in when it comes to how the vote of censure is done, our constitution under Article 82 makes provision for the vote of censure and the procedure, and that procedure isn't too different from the procedure as is in the Parliament's own standing orders. I think section 104 of the standing orders deals with the censorship. Now, so let me just read what Article 82 is saying, so at least we can all understand the constitutional basis for what is happening, and then we can have it can inform the kind of discourse we would have. Now, Article 82 says that Parliament may, by a resolution supported by the votes of no less than 2/3 of all members of Parliament, pass a vote of censure on a Minister of State. The 2 states that a motion for the resolution referred in clause 1 of this article shall not be moved in Parliament unless 7 days notice has been given of the motion, and the notice of the motion has been signed by not less than 1/3 of all the members of Parliament. I said the motion shall be debated in Parliament within 14 days after the receipt by the Speaker of the notice for the motion. And the Minister of State, in respect of whom a vote of censure is debated under clause 3 of this article, is entitled under the debate to be heard in his defense. They say where a vote of censure is passed against the minister under this article, the President may, unless the minister resigns his office, revoke his appointments as a minister. Now, so on the issue as to whether or not, by all means, the minister has to be heard, we must understand that the kind of constitutional system of constitution we took is premised on a concept of constitutionalism. Now, that concept believes in limited power as against unlimited power, and that principle also has other principles that helps in achieving the purposes of limiting powers of government, and the purpose is that our liberties should be protected. Now, one of the cardinal principles of the concept of constitutionalism is the principle that says that the concept of natural justice, and one of the 2 legs of it says that you must always hear the other side, and those are the principles that guide the kind of democracy or the kind of constitution we are running, and this article reflects that principles. And so yes, per the constitution, per the kind of principle or the constitutional principles underlying the kind of governance we are under now, it was necessary that the minister is heard. Now the other issue then was if you see the procedure, what kind of procedure then as under what kind of procedure will govern the hearing, and that's what the standing committee has prescribed, so that there is a committee and then you are heard. Now, if you also see the Article 82, it talks about the notices being given. I'm sure within that notice you state the grounds under which you want to censure the minister. Now, when you go through the reasons for which they want to censure the minister, then it explains why the majority will also want to oppose the censorship as a way. And because you see, when you look at how I'm saying our economy has been run over the past few years, and I'm not, I want to say, or I'm not saying this because I'm on this forum and I see Pan-Africanism here. But if you remember, in 1963, when Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah became president of Ghana, at some stage he started talking about neo-colonialism and we ensuring that we do not more or less create a system where we find ourselves in a new form of colonialism. When he came, he recognized that our independence must by all means lead to an economic emancipation, because when Nkrumah came, he came to meet a certain global trade system which didn't favor us. Yeah, but he also recognized that we can only gain that economic emancipation if we undertake some form of industrialization. So Nkrumah undertook a radical industrialization when he won independence for us. Nkrumah also recognized that for that industrialization ultimately to lead to our economic emancipation, it was necessary that Africa comes together. Because you're talking about, you have a situation where you are producing industry, and the question is, do you have the market, or do you have a system in place where you can compete with the already established markets? And so in '63, Nkrumah said that, look, either we unite or we die. In one of the AU conferences, especially in '63, he said either Africa united or we die. I'm sure people at that time who opposed that view were just looking at the politics of it. But when you look at the unity of Africa holistically, then you realize that it is necessary for our economic emancipation that Africa come together. And that's why in 2018, when Ghana led the African Continental Free Trade Agenda, create one African market, or bring Africa together as one. You would have thought that we would find a strategic means of taking advantage of that system. Because over the past 10 years, if you analyze, I'm sure Mr. Joseph will understand that better than I will do. But with my non-financial mind, I understand the fact that over the past 10 years, we always go to Eurobond, we go and take money there, and what that money comes to do is to short the city and then help us in our balance of payments. And then, in fact, over the past, between 2017 and 2020, when MPP claimed that, my own party, MPP claimed that they were managing the economy well. If you pay attention, you realize that anytime around certain periods, the city will be depreciating, and suddenly maybe some cocoa funds will come, or some money will come somewhere, and things will stabilize. The point is, it is necessary for us as a people, as a country, to find a way of depending more on that structure and finding a way of producing more and exporting more. It is so necessary that we get ourselves into that situation. And because of that, it was necessary that the problems we are in now, people saw themselves more as Ghanaians than as MPP or NDC or CVP and because of that, I felt that when the majority decided to take Ofori-Atta on, it was strategically wrong for the minority to have taken the Censure movement, because what they essentially did was to nip the ability of Ofori-Atta to be removed in the bud. I thought that it wasn't strategically right, because all it did was to then pit, to engender the adversarial nature of our system, and then make the majority want to close rank and then face the minority. I think we are all certain in this that Ofori-Atta must go. It shouldn't matter your political color. It shouldn't matter what I saw he brought chiefs there. It shouldn't matter at this stage of our history. We need to put Ghana beyond everything else. And I'll take a step further than my brother did. For me, I won't say that the president should show leadership by taking one side and sticking. I think the president should show leadership by getting Ofori-Atta out. I think the majority members in parliament should be focused. They should be strong. They should stick to what they've started, and they should ensure that until Ofori-Atta is removed, they do not relent on what they are doing. And I'll take the opportunity to also call on Ofori-Atta himself. That's like my brother rightly said. In any other country, in any other jurisdiction, he should have resigned. As in, what kind of explanation can we give to the situation we are in now? Especially when his lack of, or his inability to make decisions when he ought to have made those decisions is the reason why we are here. We are here because around when we were arguing about e-levy and all those things, the international market decided to take us out. Imagine Fitch and all those credit agencies started downgrading us. It means that that system that we had been operating under, where we, after every 3 months, 4 months, we went to the international market and go and borrow money, that was not going to happen anymore. And then we also didn't have a system where we ourselves could generate enough revenue to take care of our needs. Now, once he couldn't take that decisive decision, I think the honorable thing for him to have done is to resign. So I'm taking this forum once again to call on Ken, that Ken, please resign. Please resign. You've done your best. You said you're a proud man. We appreciate what you have done. But please, for the sake of this country, please resign. And all of us as Ghanaians, let's take the destiny of our country into our own hands. Let's come together as one. In our own small way, nobody's going to build this country for us. Let's build our country. Let's find ways of producing. Let's find ways of being able to take care of ourselves, because that is the only way we can prevent ourselves from going to the IMF for the 18th time. Thank you very much.
Well, is anybody here who is disappointed? Well, the brilliance shows, and the issues have been launched. And what we intend to do at this stage is to interrogate some of the things which have been thrown up there, and also to state where we have disagreements and so on, in the hope that at the end of it all of us will become better enlightened than we were before we came into this space. So I'm going to allow you to come to the microphone. I think the microphone has not been properly positioned, and I'd like to see the microphone properly positioned somewhere there facing the audience. That's what ought to be done. Position the microphone properly, and then I'm going to invite people to the microphone. But there's one issue that is not very clear to me, and if we may get some enlightening on that, that will be very, very useful. Now, when the Constitution clearly stipulates that ministers who are being censored must be given or must be heard, what does that mean? Does that mean that ministers can go into Parliament House with a string of lawyers who then can be questioning parliamentarians on their facts and their analysis? Is that what it means? I've heard one gentleman, popularly known as Professor Kuku Azar, who has said that that is not what the Constitution intended. But hey, there are so many lawyers. All the lawyers don't agree. That is why sometimes on the Supreme Court we have 11 judges, and sometimes they actually disagree and so on. So we would like to hear the views of our lawyer friend, who calls himself Comrade, although he's a die-in-the-wood capitalist. We'd like to hear his views on it, and perhaps we'd like to take it, forward. As of the state of the national economy, I don't think that there appears to be any doubts about the state of the national economy. The Minister of Finance himself admits that we are in a very, very bad place. Come to think of it, total national revenue, as a matter of fact, 105% of total national revenue, and I mean total national revenue, is expended on debt servicing, debt repayment, and public sector emoluments. Now that organized labor is demanding substantial increases in public sector pay, it means that 105% of total national revenue may not be able to cater for these three line items. That's an economy in extreme distress. It's not just an economy in distress, it's an in distress. Now, I'd like to put this in very graphic terms. If this evening, our President, His Excellency Nana Addo-Dankwa Akufo-Addo, gets some visitors in the Flagstaff House, and the visitors ask for tea, we have to borrow to be able to serve tea to the visitors. That's the reality. If this night the President is informed that one of his many relatives is in a bad way in Chebi, and he has to drive that his convoy, you see that is convoy. That is very, very impressive and elaborate convoy. He has to drive that to Chebi tonight. We'll have to borrow before we put petrol in the President's convoy. That's how bad the situation is. So we are in dire straits. Personally, I do not think that just removing Ken Ofori-Atta from office will solve this problem. It wouldn't. And I don't think that we should delude ourselves that removing one person from the Ministry of Finance would resolve any of the problems that confront us. After all, the policy, the economic policy, is presented to Parliament on behalf of the President himself. And the assumption is that before these policies are presented to Parliament, they are discussed extensively at cabinet levels. So what you're doing simply is scapegoatism. That's what you're doing. But sometimes scapegoatism itself is very, very important. It is not always that substance matters. Sometimes the aesthetics are also important. So at this stage, now that the microphone has been fixed and is facing in the right direction, I'd like to see those who have questions to ask and those who have comments to make. Just put up your hand. I can see 1, I can see 2, I can see 3, I can see 4, and I can see 5 to start. So all 5 of you can come to the microphone, starting from here, first 3, and then the 2. You go to the microphone, you raise your question, you make your comment. But please, there are so many of us that please, please, please don't exceed 1.5 minutes. So you to start with.
Good evening. Well, I would like to say you've spoken well, and I've learned a lot. So quickly to get into this, when I take a look at censorship motion taking away the finance minister debating here and there. So to me, in a nutshell, you know, the incessant increment in Ghana's officials inflating rate is nothing good to write home about in terms of our economic crisis. The country is broke. Ghanaians can't buy bread, governments borrow too much, and we can't pay our debt. Yes, of course, Ghana's economy is in a ditch. What is the way forward? So that in 5 years to come, we will not be buying A4 sheet, just a common A4 sheet paper for no less than 500 Ghana cedis. Because this is serious, I'm not even touching on bread or sugar cane. I like it when lawyers said we should find a way of producing more and exporting more. So we need leaders that are competent to deliver for the better. Thank you very much.
Yes, good evening, and thank you very much for your presentation. Our finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, he must go to save himself. And I agree with our comrade Kwesi. Politicians are deceiving the people of Ghana. They are deceiving the people. If I want to ask our legal man, how can the people make the parliament secure a national agenda, a master plan that we have to work with? Because the president have not fulfilled his promises, MPs have not fulfilled their promises in their areas. Assemblymen, when it's time for election, they will bring 3 sheets of paper. At the end of the day, they can't even fulfill 2 lines. If we have a master plan, I don't think any of these people can make even 6 months in office. Thank you very much.
Good evening. It is said that to whom much is given, much is expected. I think that people are disillusioned with how the economy has fared, and they think that it will be fitting and proper for the finance minister to resign honorably. I recall as far back 2001, 46,000 durable United States dollars meant for our black stars went missing. And as to how the money went missing, you and I have no clue. But in the end, the then sports minister, Mr. Malam Ali Yusuf Issa, paid a high price for it. We find ourselves in a situation which seems to be out of place. Ghanaians are in a limbo. So why is Mr. Kenneth Yao Kuntunkunu Ofori-Atta still at post? I think that in the interest of national unity and stability, he has to resign honorably so that he doesn't suffer the fate others like Mr. Malam Ali Yusuf Issa suffered. Thank you.
So my question goes to lawyer. Please, you made mention that, in your opinion, you think that the minority should have kind of laid off and allowed the majority to go ahead and calling for the resignation of the finance minister. So I just want to ask, how would they have pulled that off? Because in anything that is done in parliament, they need numbers to vote for or against. And the majority members who were calling for his resignation were just less than 100, and that wouldn't have been possible. So I just want to know what you think. How would they have been able to pull that off? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think our two speakers identify themselves as die-in-the-wool capitalists. I'm an unrepentant socialist, a young one for that matter, that will grow to be even more unrepentant. And I cannot be a capitalist because it is a system, like my brother says, that creates, what's the word he used? Adversary kind of system, political system. I don't think that is the right word. I think the right word is that it is a system that creates a very dishonest system for us. And that kind of dishonest system is what we are seeing. What we are seeing now is a crisis of the capitalist system. You have created a system that allows for dishonesty in the moral fiber of society. And that is what we are experiencing. You have a man who took office and told the world that going to IMF is a no-no. And like you rightly identified yourself, if today the decision by his government is that the only way out is to go to IMF, if he was really an honest man, he should have resigned and not wait for us to kick him out. You have a system. I mean, if you ask me, is the majority really honest about wanting to let go of this man? I don't think so. Is the minority in this motion of censure or whatever they call it, are they really honestly looking to get him out or for political gains? I say it is the latter. I don't think anybody wants Ofori-Atta to go. He himself doesn't want to go, and he will not go. Trust me, after 2023, I believe that Ken Ofori-Atta will still be the finance minister. Things will not get any better. Things will continue to get as worse as they are, because even if we change him, there will only be a little wind of space for us to breathe, and that will be for those of you with a little capital, not us. What we need to do is have a structural change, and I'm sure you know that better than me. You all know that all these debts we are talking about, and Uncle Kwesi rightly mentioned, debt servicing, wages and salaries, and I mean 3 items that all our revenue collected takes care of. Do you really think if we own 70% of our gold, that would be the situation? If we own 50% of the cocoa that we produce in this country, would that be the case? If we own all the diamonds, the timber, the whatever in this country, if the means of production was in the hands of Ghanaians, controlled by us for the benefit of the people, I don't think the narrative would be the same. So I call on you to join hands with the Socialist Movement of Ghana.
Given the opportunity to do so, I suspect again that we are going to start with my brother and fellow anchorite, Joe Jackson.
I want to start. Unfortunately, you didn't introduce yourself, so I don't have your name.
I'm Najib Yahya from the Socialist
Movement
of
Ghana. Najib.
Yes, Accra Collective for that matter.
Okay. I'm going to respond by giving you some statistics, right, that confirm part of what you're saying, right, and also comment that I think there is some confusion as to whether it is our democratic dispensation that is at fault or a capitalist dispensation that is causing the problem we have. But just to buttress a point that you made, which is very important, You know, in this country, we export in value more than we import. So that all things being equal, our city should actually be appreciating. The reason why we don't get what we have and we see a constantly depreciating city is not because we don't export enough. It is because we don't own enough of the exports. And I'll give you some simple statistics. Go to Nigeria. 51% of the ownership of their extractive industries, right, is owned by Nigerians. Come to Ghana. Guess what percentage? 10%. So what happens is that, I'll give an example. We export more oil in value than we import. And yet we get very little benefit from that oil because ownership is with foreigners. We were talking about how to fix this country. One of the ways to fix this country quickly is to start to enforce the local content law. To force our extractive industries to give shares to Ghanaians. To raise the level of royalties they pay. To remove the tax holidays they have. And to say to them that if you pay tax in dollars because your revenue is in dollars. And this situation where you pay tax in cedis and yet go and collect dollars and help our city to depreciate is untenable. So I agree with you in that sense. I agree with you that the problem is that we don't own enough of the production process. We are too quick to sell out. We are too quick to give out tax holidays. We don't give any local companies tax holidays, but we are quick to give foreign companies tax holidays. We are quick to give them everything they ask, and part of the problem is that they keep shipping out dollars. And then we sit here and drugs that cost 30 cedis at the beginning of the year are now costing 120 cedis because the cedi has depreciated, and yet we are exporting more than we import. So obviously there is something wrong with our process. But in truth, the lady didn't give her name. But the amazing thing is, how can we have 30 something members of the opposition and another 98 members of the ruling parliamentarians who agree on one thing, that the Minister of Finance should leave, and yet he's still at post? How can we turn Parliament into a position where Parliament is a political process? Truly, it's a political process. Parliament is not a place where you go and apply your lawyer, you file the rules, this, that. In any case, when they tried, we could all see that the committee meeting degenerated into a political process. It's simple as that. I think that committee was a farce. And if truly parliamentarians agree on something, it is amazing that they cannot effect the change they want. Whether the change is the only thing required is another issue altogether. But I say to all our parliamentarians, and especially those in the NPP, that it's a disappointment, total disappointment, that you say you want something, right? Somebody gave me a proverb. I went up north to Tamale, and somebody gave me a proverb, and he said there's a village where they sell a certain fruit. The village is famous for the fruit, and this gentleman in the proverb likes the fruit. But when they say go to the village, you say no, I won't go. That's what we have now, right? And so just to respond to Mr. Najib and Madam Nazreen, I actually agree with the two of you. I may not agree completely, but I do agree that we don't own enough of this process. So they keep telling us that our CDs are not enough. We don't have enough dollars. But if we owned the process, we will have enough dollars. Thank you.
Lawyer Appiah-Danquah.
So I think I'll attempt to address the question Mr. Pratt asked about the legality or not of the finance minister bringing lawyers to that procedure. Whether and my view is to answer that, I think we should consider when we say you have a right to be heard, as in the authorized pattern of the natural justice. What is the extent of that? The question whether or not you have a right to legal representation. And for me, my answer is yes, because especially because of what will be the consequence of the procedure. When you see the grounds for which they want to censure him, one of the grounds, most of the grounds are very legal in nature. That he's breached, I think, Article 178 of the Constitution. I think the principle of justice or fairness would dictate that he finds somebody professional who better understands the law and how the law operates to advise him so that his liberties, his rights will better be protected. And so, to the extent that the principle of ordinary authorized pattern dictates that you should have that right, that you should necessarily have the right to have a lawyer in matters that concern you, whether be it judicial, quasi-judicial, or regular matters. I think the minister has that right, and I think that right has to be protected at all times. The other issue has to do with what I remember is the socialism issue, and there again, I remember when you were saying we just to clarify, the we here stood for Ghana. So Ghana, not Ghanaians, but Ghana as a political entity owning the factors of production. Essentially, that's what he meant. Just to clarify, not necessarily Ghanaians, private Ghanaians, but Ghana as a political entity, because essentially that's one of the cardinal principles of socialism as a concept. Interestingly, see, Ghana is a very interesting country. We've tried all that. So up until so when we started as a nation, it was Ghana as a country that owned all the resources of the country. In fact, even up till now, all the cocoa in this country, per law, the cocoa farmers are not by law allowed to sell to private people. They must sell to Ghana. You understand? And Ghana will quote the price that Ghana wants. You understand? Now, if you know Kumasi very well, you see, that wasn't the situation until 1957. Until before 1957, cocoa and the produce of cocoa was owned by private people. And so when you go to places like Asafo, Ashtown, Bantama, they were built by cocoa farmers with the produce of money or the money they had from their sales to Calgary. I don't know I say I'm a capitalist, but my own dad was an about CPP. In fact, he was chairman of he was general secretary of the Cocoa Farmers Council, Mr. Martin Appiah-Danquah. I'm sure the CPP people here would know him. He was my own father. I'm sure he led that. You understand? Now, the point is, when you analyze the economy of this country, one of the reasons why Ghanaians don't have the capital to be able to compete is because of that cocoa issue. Imagine if the private people, as in up until 1957 or beyond, Ghana did not arrogate onto themselves that right and made the law that they themselves, Ghana as a political entity, should only have the right to buy the cocoa, and they quote the price for you. So you see the prices they quote on the international market. Our cocoa farmers are not earning that, and it's one of the reasons why we don't even have the individual Ghanaians don't even have, to quote what a champion said, the commanding heights of our economy, because at a very critical stage in our history, I know the socialists here will disagree with me. I know my own father may probably disagree with me. But I'm of the view that if we are not taking that socialist position we took, or even if we had taken that view, but then because an argument could be made that when we were beginning as a nation, it was very difficult to find Ghanaians who had the capacity to then undertake a private sector agenda, and so then probably Ghana as a country will start businesses, and then. But when you go to other countries who had independence around the time we had independence, like South Korea, like Singapore, countries who at that time, when they asked which of these countries could be most developed, everybody said Ghana. But South Korea, Singapore are streets ahead of us. Not because they took a different strategy from what we took. So yes, no one strategy is perfect. After all, you go to the welfare countries like Denmark and Sweden and the Scandinavian countries, and their economic systems are doing so well, and you can't say they are 100% capitalist. Maybe a mixture of the two. Maybe a mixture of the two. Maybe in some instances, yes, the state, private sector, but to go all state, and as in to go all state owned. History has told us that by 1982, we were on our knees. We were on our knees because the import substitution industrialization we undertook, which was heavily public sector led, was on its knees. It was on its knees. I know different arguments, maybe at a different forum, we could argue as to why in 1982 we were on our knees. And we were forced to then also over-liberalize. There are all critical questions we need to ask. But when you take America, the doyen of capitalism, when America was starting out, they deliberately took steps to protect their young industries. They didn't practice an over-liberalized trade system. Americans will mention Benjamin Hamilton. Benjamin Hamilton, yeah. He was the first person who laid out, I think, a 13-point policy at how to protect young American industries to enable America to compete at that time with the superpowers, the United Kingdom and France. But they didn't also over-liberalize. But in a situation, you move from a situation where your industries, and Ghana had factories. Up until 1992. Until 1992, when we did, they implemented, there was called the Diversity Implementation Act, and we sued practically all our factories for practically nothing. You get a picture. The solution, I don't think we can have an argument. Anybody can argue that the solution is in industrialization. The solution is in strategic trade. Where we can have a debate is in which form should it take? Should it be should it be led by the public again? Should it be led by private sector? If it should be led by private sector, then should it be, as in, we should find a way of it being led by Ghanaians? What strategy are we going to then employ to stimulate Ghanaians to undertake in the industrialization agenda? Because clearly that's the way. We can't have an argument. Fortunately, unlike Kwame Nkrumah, who didn't have the support of Africa when he was pushing for African unity, fortunately, we have African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, as a people, what strategy are we undertaking, are we putting in place to ensure that Ghanaians take advantage of that huge market? You are talking about a market with a population of about 1.2 billion. So we should be thinking, government should tell us. And I know that there's a 10-point industrialization agenda. I know that there's 1D, 1F, fantastic ideas. But another issue I have with my own government is, how can you justify spending about 2.1 billion on NAPCO and 400 million on 1D, 1F? How can you justify that? You can't find any justification why you spend 2.1 billion on NAPCO and just 400 million on 1D, 1F. Also with the 1D, 1F, there must be a deliberate strategy at empowering Ghanaians to lead it. Yes, it's cool if foreigners also take, but there must be a deliberate strategy. You understand? If it means finding ways of reducing credit for the Ghanaians, if you find, and it's all about strategy. Because we are talking about ECFT, how do we take advantage of it? Government by now should be telling us what strategy they are employing to ensure that our standard authority is top-notch, so that when Ghanaian goods leave Ghana and go outside, people cannot complain that Ghanaian goods are inferior. Because you also don't want to have that branding. Discuss about these issues should be coming up. And so another time we'll have that debate. But for me, I think that based on the history of this country, we've tried Ghana as a political entity owning the factors of our economy. And for whatever reason, it didn't succeed. You understand? We claim we are doing capitalism or whatever strategy we are using. But I agree with my senior brother. Ghanaians are not in control of the critical sectors of our economy, and there must be a strategy at changing that. If it means we enforcing the Local Content Act, or even going beyond that, we should go beyond that. There must be a deliberate strategy at doing that. And then just to also add that when you take the history of our country from 1992 to now, we've only had a trade balance surplus starting from 2017. So 2017 we had trade balance surplus, 2018, 2019, 2020 I'm not too sure. 2020 we have trade balance surplus. Beyond that, or before that, we always had a negative. And that was why I was saying that I felt that the minority did a mistake. But see, when you go and say that you are censuring a minister because he's incompetent, when he throws down some of these indicators, we have record GDP growth under this government. We have record per capita GDP per capita under this government. For the first time in the history of this country, of this government, we have trade balance surplus. See, when you go that route, you are giving the minister an opportunity, you understand, to then come and throw these issues out, and then you can't justify why he should leave. But I'm saying that I've told you why I think he should leave. And he should leave because we need leadership. And at the very critical point of all this economic turmoil, he didn't show that leadership. He didn't prove to me that what was in the best interest of this country was more than his personal ego. He failed to demonstrate that putting Ghana first was important to him more than his stance that we won't go to IMF and we're a proud nation, blah, 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 blah. Because at the end of the day, when we give you the privilege of leading us, taking critical decisions, the only reason for which you take decision is what is in the best interest of the country. It does not matter what your personal ego says. And you go to America, there's this case, Madry and Madsen, where the judge took a decision against himself in a way that wasn't in his interest, but it was in the best interest of the United States of America. Why can't the minister do the same? And that's why I feel he should go. And that's why I also feel that the minority did a mistake, because then what they did was then to put themselves in a situation where they had to give reasons, and that reasons had to be interrogated. But at the end of the day, it is also politics. And in the kind of politics we are playing, it's about the people. It's about the people. Unfortunately, we the people, we seem to underrate the kind of power we have. And so the majority will take that and say, look, we won't go to parliament. We'll make sure we frustrate your job. We'll make sure that people will then be turned against you. If the minority has strategically just stayed behind and allowed the majority not to bring their reasons before parliament for it to be interrogated, but to use the political game to force the president to get Ofori-Atta to go, at least by now, I think we would have been making some headway. But immediately, the minority came into the picture, and I said that our governance system, so when you go to our court system, it is all adversarial, unfortunately. Immediately, people will close ranks, and then instead of thinking about the country, they'll be thinking about, look, it's us against you. When really, in this stage of our political history, we don't need us against you. We need all of us together. And I can say with all confidence that when it comes to Ofori-Atta going, Ghanaians are very united on that. Ghanaians are really united on that. And that's why I'm taking this opportunity once again to call Ofori-Atta, go. Mr. President, sack him. If the president, for whatever reason, can't have the cojones to sack you, resign and go. Not that your going will solve our problems, but at the end of the day, in the short term, it will build some confidence in the market, and we can collectively, as the people, find a way of getting ourselves out of this at this stage. Because only Ghanaians can solve our problems, and it is necessary that we recognize that fact and start living our lives with that belief that nobody can solve our problems for us, but we Ghanaians ourselves. Thank you very much.
Friends, I ask for your permission to compromise my position as an umpire in this debate. And I do so for good reason. And the reason simply is that we are gathered here to seek knowledge and to do analysis so that we can have a better understanding of where we are and where we can be tomorrow and how we can go there. So please permit me to compromise my position. After all, I will not be the first judge to be compromising his position. Now, here we are. The capitalist state makes interventions, and the socialist state also makes interventions. Okay. So the question really is not about whether the state makes interventions or not. The question really is who benefits from these different interventions. Okay. Right now, where we are, the state is making serious interventions. And when the National Liberation Council took over after February 24, 1966, the state was making interventions. When the apostle of bourgeois democracy took over as prime minister in 1969, the state made interventions. And today, the state continues to make interventions. Now, for me, one of the questions that I like to ask, anytime that you hear that government has given a tax holiday to a company, the state is making an intervention. Okay? So, what intervention are we looking for? Are we looking at the intervention which compels cocoa farmers or all cocoa producers to sell their produce to a central point and which enables government to accumulate revenue in order to start an ambitious project like the one which was started in 1961 under the Ghana Education Trust Fund, which made it possible for me to go to secondary school and to become who I am today? Or we are looking for the intervention of the state which makes family and friends very, very rich? Now, these are questions which are up there in the skies. Today, one of the interventions that the Ghanaian state has made is simply that data bank should be the transaction advisor when we come to accumulate loans and so on. And we are told that somehow, just somehow, over the last 6 years, one company alone has made a fortune of more than $150 million. State intervention. The state could have intervened in other ways and so on. So state intervention is not necessarily capitalist and is not necessarily socialist. So we need to be looking at the objective, the effect, and so on, in order to come to firm conclusions about state intervention. Now, there is also a very subtle suggestion that the capitalist countries have achieved a certain level of advancement. Of course, there is no doubt at all about that. If you are looking at space exploration, some of these capitalist countries have gone to the extent of sending some machines to the moon and beyond the moon and so on. I mean, mobile telephony is a wonder and so on. But I like to suggest very strongly that it is not the principles as propounded by Adam Smith and Malthus which led to this phenomenal development in the capitalist world. The capitalist world became or has become what it is today because its leaders were thieves. They were buccaneers, they were pirates, they were murderers, mass murderers. The United States of America became what it has become, first and foremost. There were some vagabonds who came from England and other places, went there, and they decided to exterminate the original Indian population, steal their land, steal their cattle, steal their gold, kill them. That formed the basis of the development we now know as the United States of America. Now, for us on this side of the Atlantic, we cannot forget that we are headed into slave ships and sent over there to work for hundreds of years without pay. No pay at all. Just beast of burden. To work like beast of burden for hundreds of years without pay. But they accumulated wealth, which has formed the basis of their development. And if you doubt, read a little bit about the history of this bank. Oh my goodness. Pardon? Pardon? No. The Barclays Bank. Barclays Bank. Where did Barclays Bank come from? Barclays Bank was founded by two brothers, the Barclay brothers, and they were slave traders. You understand? So when you go to the Barclays Bank and you see all those people suited, wearing nice ties and beautiful makeup and so on, don't forget that the Barclays brothers, who the bank is named after, were nothing than slave traders. That's where the capital came from and so on. So now, beyond the classical slavery and so on, also came classical colonialism. And what was classical colonialism? Thievery, organized thievery of the resources of countries like Ghana, of countries like Peru and so on. Organized stealing. And if you doubt me, take what they call the geography map of Ghana, take it. And look at some, don't look far, just look at the railway lines. The railway lines tell you all the story. All the railway lines start from areas of concentration of wealth and they end at the ports. There's no railway line between Takoradi and Pusiga. So the railway lines start from where there is bauxite, where there is gold, where there is iron, where there is timber and so on. They all end at the port. And that's a very serious description of the colonial economy and how these countries today appear to be more developed than us. It isn't because their orientation, it's not because the ideologies they followed was right and wrong and so on. These were thieves, plain-faced thieves. And they continue to steal with the connivance of our, how do I call them? Our leaders. You understand? That's why we are where we are today. Now, look at some of the interventions that the Ghanaian state makes today. Look at who benefits from tax holidays. Who benefits from tax holidays? The other time I heard about a gentleman who says that he has enough money to invest in hotels. And bam! Tax holiday. Giving him free. You do your work, don't pay tax. Hotels. In this situation in which we are, hotels. Abba. If our leaders were to do a little thinking, perhaps we would not be where we are today. So these are really some suggestions that I like to make. Now, there's the suggestion that the private sector can become, they say, engine of development. And I sit back and ask myself, engine of development, which kind of development? The only motivation for the private sector is profit. Nobody wakes up in the morning building clinics with private money only because they want to end malaria in the country. Unless they are non-governmental organizations or something like that. But business power there. They build clinic so that they can profit out of the malaria you suffer. You understand? And it's clear. The motivating factor for the private sector is profit. Now, some have described profit as theft. I wouldn't like to do that for now. But some have described profit as theft, and so on. I would like to do that for now. What I like to do now is to say that there are other motives for production. There are other motives for production. Cuba is one of the very few countries which has produced, I think, 2, 3, or 4 different vaccines, 5 different vaccines since COVID-19 broke out. Cuba is not doing it because anybody's bank account will grow. They are doing it because as people, they see a responsibility to end disease. Okay? Now, there are other multinational corporations which are producing vaccines. They're doing that because it makes them behave like Accra. Gari Sika or Sika Gari or whatever it is. It can enable them to double their money. Double their money. And sometimes in the private sector, so much money is accumulated, and then you ask yourself, Abba, this accumulation, where is it leading us? You hear that one person has so many billions, and they don't know what to do with it, so now there is some competition. They build some very complicated crafts, put friends and relatives in them, and shoot themselves into the sky for a few minutes and come back to earth, and then millions are bent. Millions are bent. At a time when children are lying on their bellies in Asankregwa, in schools and so on, they just fun, boom, into the sky. Within a few minutes, they've burned many hundred billions and they're back on earth and they think they've done something great and so on. So, look, there are different paradigms of development. The paradigm that I think should guide us is the paradigm which aims at resolving the concrete problems that face human beings. Access to health, access to housing, access to food, and so on. That, for me, is more important than the fattening of bank accounts of multinational corporations and so on and so on. And of course, some reference has been made to the Nkrumah era. Of course, factories were built. Indeed, close to 500 of them. These factories produced virtually everything. As I was growing up, Georg was producing refrigerators, it was producing radio sets, it was producing television sets, and so on. As I was growing up, we actually began producing vehicles, the Buffalo truck, and then the Adum truck, and so on. We were producing our own food, and so on. Even under Achampong, Ghana became self-sufficient in the production of grains, and so on. So those were great times. Yes, it is true that it was claimed that the state enterprises were not managed well, and so, but that was a claim. And indeed, those claims were bogus, because today we can prove that those claims had no merit at all. Up until today, when we get broke, when we don't know where to go, what do? We look around and see if some of those factories in Nkrumah established are still lying somewhere, and then we sell them in order to balance our accounts. Ally? When the Kufuor government got into a bind and workers were agitating for increasement in salaries and so on, it was looking around. What did Nkrumah leave? And then he saw that Nkrumah led Ghana Telecom and said, good idea. They sold Ghana Telecom in order to balance the books. And that is still continuing. You understand? It is still continuing. Today, we have 3 terminals at our airport. Somebody looked around and said, maybe we can do with 2. Let's privatize the first one. Terminal 1 has been privatized. It was built by the Nkrumah government. So many years after, we are still profiting from the legacy of Nkrumah. Let's close your eyes. Close your eyes. And imagine Ghana today without the Akosombo hydroelectric project. Today I'm told that if you look at the generation mix and so on, Akosombo contributes less than 30%, of what we need. But take out 30%. Take out 30% for the generation mix and see what Ghana will look like and so on. So, I like the spirit that has been exhibited by our 2 friends. Even the fact that they agreed to come here is something for which we have to salute them. We have to salute them for coming here and sharing their ideas with us and so on. But there's no coin that has only one side. Coins have 2 sides. And I've seen different coins. I've seen a coin which has the coat of arms of Ghana on one side, and on the other side, Nkrumah's head. Today we have removed Nkrumah's head, and there are many reasons why we removed Nkrumah's head. I was going through the old newspaper some time ago, and I read a petition which some of our politicians then made about Nkrumah's head appearing on our currency. Said, no, not Nkrumah's head. If there has to be any head, it has to be the head of Queen Elizabeth. Brazilian coupon. Not Nkrumah said the head of Queen Elizabeth. So, comrades, friends, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take our last round of contributions. I saw 2 hands up. I hope there are still 2 hands up. Let me see the hands up again. Oh, Charlie. Okay, 4 hands. We deal with you, and then the panelists would respond, and then we'll ring the bell for all of us to go home. So 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th.
We are very much grateful for people who are here with us today. But I'm still wondering, and I felt I have to say something despite the explanation given by Uncle Kwesi Pratt. In fact, you were so much conversant with, as a lawyer, you're so much conversant with Kwame Nkrumah and his ideals. Now you quoted from one of his 1963 speech in Kinshasa, that Africa should be united. And he said so many things about this program. Why then do you call yourself a capitalist? And why is it that you can't follow the footprints or the blueprints that Kwame Nkrumah laid down for Ghana? That's one question. Then this is a general one. I think we are so much disappointed in the NPP government. I just want to make it, we want to kill somebody. The person must be killed. Because you are saying you are coming from a different angle. You said that person shouldn't be killed. The person must be killed, not necessarily with a knife. But then Ofori-Atta should step aside for maybe another person to take over. So right now, our people are so much disappointed. The masses are disappointed. But when you talk to the people on the market, there's a possibility that they maybe are not present. So we want you people to back up, unite your front so that we move forward, because people are really, really suffering going into 23 and 24. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again. But practically, Africa is very, very young for capitalism. And Ghana too is very, very young for capitalism. Because if you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know, then you don't know. But in this country, we have somebody who knows, and people refer to him even as a prophet. There is nothing wrong if you can just turn your eye and look on these things and use it. It's very, very sad that Ghana will find himself in such a situation when Kwame Nkrumah adopted his socialist policies, and within a short time, the development plan, we achieved a lot. And Asian countries have learned from us. But today we are sitting down and we have left ourselves, we have come into this rot. No, we can't be justified. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I grew up in Tema, and I was a little boy when the 1966 coup took place. And not many people have television or radio. And I remember very well that, well, you know, there's so many factories in Tema. So when the people from work, they come to my home, my father's, and they sit around the television, listen to all the news. And there was something showed that the Mokola women were dancing, jubilant for what happened. And I remember this. My father said, "You dancing today, tomorrow you dance with tears." And I didn't understand that until when our papa grew up. It has been said here and all over that we have been trying something after Kwame Nkrumah, and it seems nothing have worked. And all that we are saying, let's go back, because those who were there when Kwame Nkrumah was, a president, all the policies is for the people. Now the people are suffering, and we are saying, let's go back to that policies, and we will be free. Yes, the finance minister have to go, but we also know that a head is there, and the head also need to go. Thank you.
It's okay. This is for Mr. Jackson. In the attempt to correct the crisis that has been caused by Ken Ofori-Atta, I think recently the Vice President also threw in a new policy that they intend to introduce from 2023, which is the gold for oil. So I would like to hear your perspective on that, whether it is the same Ejapa, some have said that it's the same Ejapa that is coming up in another form, or this is also another capitalist attempt to siphon our resources out of the country. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. Mr. Jackson, in your response, your response before you sat down, you said something like, it is not about ideology. The problem might be about the democracy we practice. It seems you want to isolate, or you want to treat some of these components separately. Our very existence depends on the economic practices that we have. So it cannot be that the economy and the democracy we practice are different. I want to give you an example. If today there is someone who is sick and the person needs oxygen urgently, and you are sick and you also, God forbid, and you also need oxygen urgently, the probability that you will be given the oxygen and then the ordinary person, maybe like myself, will not be given the oxygen is very high because of the economic practices we have. Because people who owes capital or people who have money have been allowed to control the system, just as Ken Ofori-Atta is doing. Because Ken Ofori-Atta is not there because he's intelligent or brilliant than any Ghanaian, to tell you the truth, but because he has enough resources and has been able to support some government to some extent. That's why he's not been able to move. That is what we are talking about here. Capitalism in itself more or less glorify these kind of things. And what we are saying is that we shouldn't allow that to fester. Socialism is saying that let's all be treated equally, so that when you are sick and I'm sick, and we go, all of us can have a share of the oxygen and we can survive. So for you to try to isolate, what's the name, capitalism from our democracy is a problem for me, because the democracy we practice is a capitalist democracy, because our democracy is supposed to reflect in the economic practices that we have. I should have a say in how much our gold is sold, and yet I don't have a say. They've created a certain mirage to suggest that we have MPs and they have it. We don't have a say. They go there and they speak on they are on the same level. They are in the same class, and we are on a different class. That is what we are talking about. It's a class struggle. So if you appreciate it this way, you will know that our democracy is not different from the economic practices that we have or the ideology that is persisting in this country. Thank you.
Comrades, in Parliament, as in the law courts, as everywhere, even here, tactics are important. Some say you need to strategize all the time, and so on. And I'm in full agreement with lawyer Appiah-Danquah that when it comes to strategy, I honestly believe that the so-called minority in Parliament acted opportunistically and brought us where we are today. Now here you have a case where in the morning, 80 members of Parliament, MPP, say, we want Ken Ofori-Atta out. We are not doing government business and so on. By evening, the number has risen to 95. In 3 days, all the members of the MPP in Parliament, including ministers, have come to the same position. That had become the majority caucus's position. Why would you rise with a motion of censure to do what? All they could have done was to sit back and support. If they had done that, Ofori-Atta probably would not be there today. But then quickly, somehow, somebody thought that if they did it, they get some credit or whatever. They went in there. And then the issue now became a partisan issue. MPP versus NDC. And that's where we are today. So I'm in full agreement with lawyer Appiah-Danquah that sometimes strategy is important. Sometimes, can I finish and then I'll give you the opportunity to do whatever you want to do. So I'm in full agreement that sometimes, strategy is necessary. It's important, okay? Now, running the economy and running national affairs, I think that one of the most dangerous things is to take a dogmatic approach. Lenin, Marx, Engels, all of them, including Ernesto Che Guevara, spoke against dogmatism, okay? Because if you're running a society, you are always negotiating. You are always looking at balance of forces. You are looking at so many things and so on. So dogmatism tends to be problematic. Ultimately, I want to see the socialization of the Ghanaian economy. I want to see the economy in the hands of the Ghanaian working class and their allies and so on. How we get there is a whole lot of maneuver, sometimes tactical and so on. Sometimes you retreat small in order to get strength to smash the enemy and so on. So I think it's important for us to realize that dogmatism doesn't work for capitalism, and it doesn't work for socialism. It doesn't work for anything. Dogmatism, as properly defined, is impervious to reason and to the dynamics, of our society and so on. I mean, I'm sitting here and I see Mr. Mensah, Anthony Mensah, I can't see him anymore, walk to the microphone. And as usual, I'm wondering what is going to come out of this gentleman's mouth. And it pops out. If you want to kill somebody, you don't want to kill anybody. I mean, what an analogy. Killing somebody, everybody must leave. We don't want to kill somebody, we don't want to kill nobody. And I think that what the parliamentarians sought to do, both sides, was to ensure that some sanity prevailed in the management of the economy. I think I've spoken more than necessary. I see the gentleman sitting behind Najib wants to make a point. We would allow him to make the point, and thereafter, our two panelists will have the microphone for as long as they want, and then we'll draw the curtains down. Please, you don't have more than 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Kwesi, for the opportunity, and thank you to our panelists, Joe Jackson, and then the venerable lawyer Appiah-Danquah. Of course, Appiah-Danquah is a very good friend of mine. I think very good and then important submissions have been made. But I have a bit of, there's a bit of inconsistency that I sense in some of the, not some, I think just one of the points lawyer made. I mean, you make the good point that Ofori-Atta is not guilty because he's not incompetent, right? What's the point, the problem you have with him is the fact that he failed to show leadership and then to act in the national interest, to resign and all of that. Okay, so let's take that. Now, a motion has been moved in Parliament by minority. I mean, whether it is expedient, whether it is strategic, whether it is timely, and then all of that. The majority, you had a position, right? In principle, you agree with the position that this finance minister should not be in power, should not be there, should not be at post. So why not in the same of that national interest support the motion to get him out of power? Because anything else then is parochial. Then you're acting, I mean, NDC, and we are reducing it to NDC. Yeah, it's most unfortunate. We shouldn't do that. But then if we see the bigger picture, if we see the wider national interest, then it's not so much about whether this NDC was going to take score 1 point and then we will score 0 from this. Then I expect the argument to be consistent. Let's act. So we should call them out for not acting in the national interest, but by allowing their parochial and personal interests to upend the national interests. So that is where my inconsistency lies in terms of the argument you made.
This will be my concluding remarks. There's so much we agree on. We agree that the economy is a mess. I even dare say we agree on the solutions. And yet, why we are in this mess is that we keep emphasizing our differences over what we agree on. We agree that there should be import substitution, right? We may agree on, as my big brother said, whether the intervention should be to empower the state or the intervention should be to empower the individual. But we agree that there's an import substitution. We agree that we do not own, either as individuals or as a state, we do not own the production in this country. There's so much we agree on. And what I will urge all of us to do is to focus on what we agree on and not to focus on what differentiates us. Because where we are, we cannot afford to keep arguing about all those are differences, which in truth may be relatively insignificant compared to the dire situation which we are in. And that's one of the things that I have to say. The other thing is to appeal to the generation younger than me. I'm a relatively old man, right? The challenges will be felt by those who are younger. And when I look here, I see quite a few faces who are young. The old men don't have the ideas. The old men can't seem to act. Maybe it's time for you to agree on what we need to do and to act positively. You see, the debt that is outstanding, I may not pay much of it. But you and you and you and you'll be paying it. Right? The challenges that we'll face will bite harder on the young men and the youth and the young ladies in this country than it will bite on the old. So you have to rise up. You have to put MP under pressure. You have to subjugate your differences. You have to get this country to move forward in a way in which my age group and older cannot seem to do. And that's really what I'd like to end on. That what unites us, what is common to all our positions, is far bigger than what separates us. Thank you very much.
Yes, so I'll address a few of the issues raised. The first one I want to address is the issue about the consistency in the argument. With all due respect, I disagree very vehemently that there's an inconsistency in the argument. And I disagree vehemently because the focus of the argument has to do with the strategy. Now, I'm saying that immediately the minority, after the majority had indicated that Ofori-Atta had to go, otherwise they were going to withdraw their parliamentary business and it was going to affect the government. It was strategically wrong for the minority then to quickly jump in and then initiate the censure motion. And I'm saying that personally, the reason why I strongly believe that Ofori-Atta had to go was not because he's incompetent per se, because that's a very subjective question. What do you mean by incompetence? But I'm saying that once the majority had initiated an action, that was not going to then interrogate competency or not. but then was going to use more or less the political power, was going to more or less force the president to let Ken go. There was no need for the minority to have brought a procedure that would enable us to interrogate why they want him to go. Because what they probably disagree with is the reasons why they want him to go. Because you say he's incompetent. I'm saying that then you make us to interrogate. And then when you take the indices may not support the claim that he's incompetent. So once people are taking a certain step, his own people are taking a step, that was not going to look into, interrogate the numbers and all this, all those things. But the mere fact that, but we are going on the mere fact that, look, this man has not shown leadership. Maybe he's probably acted slowly. His presence there won't help the economy to rebound because the father probably he lacks the credibility, just the credit. The minority should have just sat back and then allow his own people to kick him out. And that's why I disagree with you that it is inconsistent. The reasons why they wanted Ken out is very consistent, and also in terms of the strategy. Now, the second bit has to do with what Mr. Pratt said, and let me put on record that I agree with him when he says that state intervention can be done or ought to be done, whether it is socialism or capitalism. And I give the example of America. That there's no country that flies the flag of capitalism more than America. And yet the USA is one of the countries that has used state intervention to get them to where they are. And I give a classical example of when America became independent around 1776, and one of their foremost Secretary of State, Hamilton, I can't remember the first name, but Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton introduced a certain 12-point trade strategy, which was very, very state, in fact, which flies against anything trade liberalization. And you wonder that America, champion of democracy, champion of trade liberalization, and yet when they were young, America thrived on state intervention through their first government's trade policy, which didn't allow make sure that their young industries could thrive and all. Yeah, so state intervention is as you can't argue with that, except that, and so I believe that even now, more than anything else, we need the state to intervene in the economic development of this country. And that's why programs like the 1D1F must be supported to succeed, because it's one of the biggest state interventions in our attempts to be industrialized. Because whether we can argue all we want about socialism, about capital, and maybe at another forum we can have that debate. But at where we are right now, it is necessary and it is important that we all interrogate, question, act in a manner that will ensure that programs which represent state interventions, whose focus is to transform the economy, is to enable production to be increased. We make sure that when we take advantage of them, and also that they succeed. We shouldn't keep quiet. If we feel that we don't support how it is being implemented, we should talk, because that's why it is a democracy. Finally, I don't know whether it's as why I grew up in the CP house, and that's a matter of ideology. And my brother here knows me very well from uni, and I think at another time we will debate on whether socialism or capitalism, but like I'm saying, my position is more of, I think, a combination of the two. And I can mention the Scandinavian countries. As in, right now, you can't afford to be a hardliner. You can't afford to be a hardliner. Right now, it's about what strategy is going to make us economically emancipated. Because that's the essence of why we had our political independence. And all policies, all ideas, all interventions should be brought on board, all ideas, to ensure that at least we have the economic benefit of our political independence. To conclude, I'll call on all of us Ghanaians. As in, when you go through the history of any country, there's no one single country in the world that was developed by foreigners. All the great nations are great because they were developed by their own people. Let us be interested in the politics of this country. Let us be interested in the growth of this country. Let us love this country more than anything else, and let us all come together as Ghanaians and build our country so that we can gain the fruits, the benefits, the promises of our independence. Thank you very much.
Well, what can I say at this stage? Thank you all very, very much. Panelists, audience, the crew from Pan-African Television, everybody, those of you who watch us from your homes and all, thank you very much. This is what Ghana needs to be able to move forward. More discussion, more debate, more dialogue, finding answers, and better analysis to the problems that confront us. Thank you all very, very much. See you again next week. And just to announce that every Thursday from 4 p.m. we meet here to do just what you saw. So wherever you are, every Thursday evening, come to the Freedom Center on Kotoko Avenue, Kokomemble, Accra, near the Kwame Nkrumah Circle. This is where it happens. And it happens for the good of all of us. Bye-bye.